Now I would like to get into the analysis of the genetic study. The study, published in Nature Communications, which is a leading scientific journal, was titled "Punic People Were Genetically Diverse with Almost No Levantine Ancestors." Here is the abstract of the study, and I will not read it, but to summarize it, 210 individuals were sequenced. Of these, 196 were from 14 sites that were traditionally identified as Phoenician and Punic, and these were from the Levant, from North Africa, from Iberia, from Sicily, from Sardinia, and from Ibiza, and there was also an early Iron Age individual from Algeria. What was found was that the Punic individuals analyzed had no Levantine ancestry, and the North African contribution was also minimal, with the majority coming from an Aegean Sicily-like source dating back to the Bronze Age, such as the Mycenaeans. Despite this, however, towards the end of this video, I will show that utilizing the Global 25, it's apparent that the Carthaginian samples had a bit of Levantine ancestry, and you will see that it was in no way insignificant. However, before I do that, I would like to take a look at the rest of the key findings from this study. Here is a map from the study, and you can see that it highlights the location of the sites from which the samples were taken from, including 2 original Phoenician sites, and the remainder of the sites are from the Carthaginian Empire's greatest extent and sites that are traditionally associated with Punic civilization. Here is the principal component analysis, or PCA, featured in this study, and you can see that the Phoenician samples that were sequenced cluster closely to the Bronze Age Canaanites, whereas the Punic samples are in between Aegean populations as well as North Africans, with a bit also clustering with Iberia and 2 clustering in Central Europe. And this is very interesting, and this shows that the Punic people were very diverse, but they had very little influence from the Levant, and despite this they did have some North African ancestry, and this shows interactions between the Punic and Southern European settlers and the indigenous population of North Africa. What's more is that the majority of the samples from the Punic sites of Carthage and Kirkwan cluster with Aegean populations and not North African populations. And as further evidence for these findings, the study featured admixture panels for the various populations of Punic descent from the Levant, from North Africa, as well as from Southern Europe. And you can also see to the right there, the different time periods are also labeled and color-coded, as are the individual components, which for the North African component it's in yellow, the Iran Neolithic component is in pink, the Levant Bronze Age component is in dark red, the Iberia Sardinia component is in green, the Steppe component is in grey, and the Greece Sicily Bronze Age component is in dark blue. And as you can see, for the majority of these samples, the ancestry is derived largely from a Greece Sicily Bronze Age source. Here is a close-up of the admixture breakdowns for the Carthaginians, and these samples are from 450 BCE to 170 BC, and you can see that the majority of their ancestry derives from a Greece Sicily Bronze Age source. What's more is that these samples seem to have no Levantine ancestry and have a bit of Iran Neolithic ancestry as well, alongside minor amounts of Steppe, Iberia, Sardinia ancestry, and there is also very minimal North African ancestry, though in 3 of the samples it is somewhat significant. Nonetheless, in the others it is minimal. Thus, what these findings seem to indicate is that on a genetic level, the ancient Carthaginians were primarily a Mediterranean population descending largely from Eastern Mediterranean and Aegean settlers. Despite this, however, here is another admixture panel from the same study, and you can see that in this one, the Carthaginians have significant Levantine ancestry, which is represented here in green, though this is also the same representation used for the Iran Neolithic component. Nonetheless, I feel that the Carthaginians did indeed have some Levantine ancestry that was unfortunately baked into the Aegean component, and this will actually become more evident when I take a look at the G25 results. And another interesting aspect discussed in the study was that the North African ancestry was below 50% in all individuals except for 3 from Kirkwan, 2 from Villaricos, and 1 from Tharos. And even in North Africa, 10 out of the 27 individuals from Kirkwan and 5 out of the 17 individuals from Carthage can be modeled with no indigenous North African ancestry, and 84% of individuals from these sites have more than 50% Sicilian Aegean ancestry, and this was actually the dominant component. And what this shows is that on a genetic level, the indigenous North African ancestry was minimal in these ancient Punics. Despite the minimal North African ancestry, the Punic population still exists on a cline between Northwest Africa and Europe, and the majority of the samples fall in the Aegean and European clusters. Nonetheless, there are some that are more tilted towards Northwest Africa, but these are minimal, as you can see that the great majority of them are just largely an Aegean population with little to no Levantine input and also little to no Central European input as well.